Film photography is on the rise. There's no question about it, unless you've been living under a rock. You must also know that the increase in film production and demand has its own negative effects on the environment. In this video, I'm going to try and cover some of the types of those effects and what we can do to minimize some of those effects. However, this video is not a shaming or a blaming exercise. I'm here simply as someone that's benefiting from the product. And I feel like we are collectively responsible for some of these effects, and having a conversation about it, I believe, is a good place to start to be able to address it. I also believe that as a community, we have a lot of redeeming qualities, one of which is to be more open and acceptable of our differences, and also to be able to have honest and difficult conversations when necessary. And I think this conversation falls in that category. I just want to say that what I can do to shoot film responsibly might be different than what you can do. That doesn't mean one of us is better than the other. All it means is that as a community, we're trying to educate and equip ourselves with more information and to be able to do the best we can with it. So what are the effects? Environmental effects, I think, can be broadly classified into two categories: production effects and consumption effects. Production effects, as the name suggests, comes from the manufacturing of the products that we use in film photography, such as film, gear. I know a lot of the cameras and lenses are used gear that we participate in a circular economy, which is great, but there's a lot of growing new gear manufacturers like light meters and camera straps and stuff like that, disposable cameras and all that jazz, and the effects that come with like raw materials that are used in film production, for instance, such as gelatin that is derived from cows, developing chemicals that are manufactured to be used in developing the film that we shoot. There are environmental effects associated with it, like water wastage, energy used, greenhouse gas emissions, improper disposal of chemical waste, and inefficient processes that lead to environmental effects. So yeah, those are some of the production effects. Consumption effects, for the most part, is driven by us, the consumers, and there are quite a few of them. Buying habits, like buying used or new gear online, which means we're contributing to transportation emissions and packaging waste. Disposable cameras, enough said, I guess. Single-use plastic that goes into landfills. Buying or developing film ourselves, which in some cases might lead to improper disposal of chemical waste, wasting chemicals that have expired, water, inefficient use of water and therefore water waste, and then there is traveling for photography, where we again contribute to carbon emissions. What can we do about it? How can we be more responsible? I think the first and foremost thing we can do is to educate ourselves on what goes into film production or other gear manufacturing and what the effects are, and also educate ourselves on what some of these companies do to be more environmentally responsible or sustainable. Especially companies that we regularly buy from, and we can do that by reading their corporate social responsibility reports, environmental sustainability reports. I'll link a couple of them below. I think they're an interesting read. The Ecology of Grain is a really good research paper that focuses on the use of gelatin derived from cows in film production. So yeah, educating ourselves on the effects and what is currently being done is a good place to start. And then we can raise our concern either directly via email or through social media to these companies, ask questions on what they're doing to fix some of the issues. One thing that comes to my mind is like the usage of plastic containers that is in almost all film packaging. Like, I bet companies can change that. I get that, you know, it's there to increase the shelf life of the film, but I would be okay to have a lower shelf life film stock if it means that it comes in a more environmentally friendly packaging. Yeah, raising concerns and asking questions would be another good thing to do. We can also kind of vote with our money, as cliche as that might sound, by trying out alternatives that offer environmentally friendly packaging, like Street Candy and New Classic and some other film stocks. Again, like, I'm not saying let's stop shooting film altogether or let's boycott some of these companies, but I think knowing more about what's going on and asking questions, I think it's a good place to start to kind of drive the focus towards more environmentally friendly production. What can we do to change our consumption habits? Now, this is a lot more easier than trying to address production effects, because this is something that we can control. So I guess, like, we can try and buy locally to begin with, whether it's film or whether it's used gear. We can try and buy expired film. Buying camera gear, there are a lot of camera shops that sell used gear nowadays, especially with the increase in demand for film photography. So I think that's something we can all do. And you know, I'm guilty of ordering from Japan as well, and it usually means there's a lot of plastic packaging that comes with it, and not to mention the carbon emissions I've contributed to by transporting an object from the other side of the world to here. So yeah, buying locally for all your needs could be something we can start doing. Maybe it doesn't have to be for all your needs, but some of the things that you're currently purely buying online can be swapped out for things that you can buy locally. And extending that, like, you can also develop your film locally rather than packaging it and sending it off to another country or another place in your country. By avoiding that, you're avoiding contributing again to packaging waste and emissions that comes from transporting your stuff back and forth. You can also ask your local lab on what they do to be more environmentally friendly and how they dispose of their chemicals and stuff like that, to be more aware of what is going on and what kind of business you're supporting. And then, like, disposable cameras, I guess simply try and avoid buying them, you know, if you can. If you notice a pattern where you're regularly buying disposable cameras, maybe it's time for you to buy a 35mm camera, a small point and shoot maybe, that you can keep with yourself at all times, and you can just, you know, buy film and load it in there rather than buying single-use plastic and dumping it in a landfill. Also, developing film with a lab rather than developing it yourself, especially if you're shooting at small quantities, you might be able to avoid wasting chemicals that expire, or wasting or disposing of chemicals improperly, and, you know, might even be better off when it comes to water wastage. Another thing we can do is to try and buy film in bulk. Plastic containers that we touched on briefly earlier, if we buy like 100 feet film, I think it cuts down to 18 rolls, which means we've avoided buying 18 plastic containers, which is great. This is something that I have not tried personally, but I fully intend to in the future. So yeah, that's something we can do. And in terms of traveling for photography, again, everybody's different, our situations are different. But if we can, you know, some of the things we can do is, like, if you can't fully do a trip, you know, without a car, maybe try and break down your trip where you're renting car for a couple days and then you're using public transport for a couple of other days of the trip. Or if you are in a position where you can do the whole trip via public transport, maybe give it a try, you know, maybe you'd enjoy it, and it's definitely better for the environment, especially if you're just one person driving around and taking photos. Try and use public transport. There are efforts made in some key areas when it comes to raw materials used in film production, sustainable darkroom facilities that recycle water and reuse some of the things, and use hyper accumulating plants to collect heavy metals in large quantities from the soil, and environmentally friendly alternatives when it comes to developing chemicals. So what we can do to support them is contribute them in their research, because they do invite anybody and everybody to take part in it. Learn from them and try and implement some of the things you learned in your own kind of developing process where applicable, or even simply contribute monetarily if that's something you're inclined to do, because anything we can do to help companies or projects that are pushing boundaries in terms of moving towards environmentally friendly alternatives or solutions is a good thing. And I think Sustainable Darkroom specifically, they do have a Patreon page, I believe. I'll link that in the description below as well. There's already a dialogue surrounding environmental effects and participating in making it better, on what we can do when it comes to film photography. And we now have added to that conversation through this video. I would love to hear your thoughts on this matter, and any other suggestions or tips you have when it comes to shooting film responsibly. But yeah, that's been it. I'm sorry that this was a long video, but yeah, I hope you found some of it useful. Thank you so much for giving me your time. I truly appreciate it. Take care, and I'll see you next week. Bye.